Welcome to the lecture 4. In lecture 4, we will discuss about the housing policy and government intervention. In lecture 3, we discussed about the present housing condition in India. We identified few issues which we will take for the discussion of the policy and the intervention. Mostly those issues are before going to the policy, we should have a quick look on the issues. So, number 1, we identified that the shortage housing shortage for past few decades is ever increasing. That is the first thing. Presently it is 20 million roughly. Second, we discussed that housing shortage and housing situation in India is having several disparities. And also mismatches. One of the mismatch was between the supply and demand. We discussed that the LIG and EWS and MIG and HIG, for these people the shortage is 96% of total and this is only 4%, this is shortage. Whereas the supply is only 15% and 85%. So, you can see that the shortage and the supply does not match with the current situation. Second mismatch was between the between the supply of special category housing. By and large, this shortage is for family based housing requirement, but there are housing shortages required for the non family single person or a couple of person who come for the short duration in the cities, that is another issues. Third, which we discussed, is the issue of the land, and fourth we also mentioned the finance and also governance mechanism. So, based on this, today we will discuss the policy and public intervention. Now, so that we can address these issues which we discussed. So, for discussing this, we will have the discussion on housing policy, planning, and then strategy. We will see what does it mean, what are the differences between these three terms, and then we will go to the we will see the public interventions in terms of policy and planning and the strategy. So, what are policy? Policy is basically some long duration long term broad principles which is by and large intangible but it leads to some tangible outcome. So, it is basically some broad principles or broad guidelines which is given and which is basically intangible. It has some intangible guidelines, but whose main objective is to bring some tangible outcomes. So, a policy must be inclusive. A policy should cover all categories of houses, all category of people, all geographical variations, all timelines. That is number 1. Second is, a policy should be long term. A policy is made at least for 20 years future. Sometimes policies are amended, but policy is made for long term benefit of the overall country. Then policy is basically intangible, and policy covers large geographical area. Like housing policy, any policy, it should cover either national or state. Usually we do not make the policy for the cities or for the local areas. So, these are the basic elements of a or dimensions of a policy, and definitely the policy should be flexible so that it can serve different contextual. So, these are the broad dimensions of the policy. It should be inclusive, it should cover all categories of people, all categories of the environment, it should serve long term purpose for a country or for a state. It is basically intangible principles whose ultimate outcome will be tangible. Large geographical area coverage, either national or state, and it should be flexible so that every context it can be suitably used. After we make the policy, it is basically after that we make the planning. Similarly, for planning also it is inclusive. Therefore, planning also should be done for all categories of people, all categories of all age group people, all categories of community. Similarly, like policy, it might be for mid term, mid and short term, like 10 to 5 years possible. Unlike the policy, the planning must be giving some tangible outcome or tangible benefits, and it serves, unlike the large geographical area, it serves cities or villages or region. And where the policy is flexible or contextual, the planning is prescriptive. And specific. For example, if we make a plan for a city of Mumbai, it should not be applicable for any other city. It is a specific prescription for a city. So, the planning is inclusive like policy. It serves mid to short term, 5 to 10 years. In some cases it is also 1 year as an annual plan. I will come later for the discussion on the planning. The planning should give some tangible benefits, tangible outcome at the end of planning exercise. It serves cities, village and region, and it is prescriptive and specific, not flexible and open. After the planning is done, we come to the strategy. What is a strategy? Basically, in planning or in policy, everything cannot be done very straightforward way. Sometimes there are many ways to achieve a certain objective or certain function. So, which of the path or which of the methods we should take as a path, that is very important in planning. So, it is a strategic position. So, basically strategy is a tactical position or method to achieve planning outcome. Like we told that planning is always have the outcome of tangible outcome. So, to achieve the tangible outcome, the whatever the tactical position or method we are taking, that is part of a strategy. For example, if we plan for a clean and green environment for a city, what are the means and what are the methods or what are the ways we should take for a city to achieve the green and clean city, that becomes the tactical position or the methods or the ways to achieve this become the strategy. So, therefore, strategy is also always specific and in some cases it can be flexible also, flexible or time dependent. Any strategy, if you find that it is not working for a particular context, even if the strategy is taken and it is not bringing the tangible outcome, we may change or we may revise this strategy maybe next year or next to next year. So, that it becomes the flexibility and time dependent, and in always it is contextual. The strategy taken for a plain land cannot be successful, the strategy for the hill areas. Strategy taken for a river basin conservation cannot be applicable for strategy for the conservation of a desert area or any other area. So, strategy planning strategy is always contextual based on the geography, community, people and environment. Therefore, we discuss the three term policy, planning and strategy. So, what is the basic difference? Basically, policy tells you that where to go, that means where we should reach in a long term perspective, and planning tells us that what to do for our cities or for our regions, and to achieve that the strategy tells us how to do. Therefore, this is the basic difference of the policy, planning and strategy. So, policy gives the broad direction, which gives us a long vision where to go. To achieve this, we have to you have to prepare plan which is basically prescriptive, and what to be done, it gives you the specific actions, and to achieve this we take some strategic location, strategic tactical position, that becomes the strategy, and basically it is how to do, how to bring this planning intervention. So, in housing policy and planning intervention we will discuss policy, then planning, and with the planning we will also discuss strategy, how for a city level we can make planning and strategy, that we will discuss. So, after this we will see the in India after the independence, how the policies came one by one, and we will see that what are the planning intervention, public intervention happen before that. So, now we will go to the public intervention. We have to discuss this, we have divided into two parts from 1947 to 90s we will discuss today, and from 90s to till 2016 we will discuss next day. So, let us see the what happened for the public intervention in housing after the independence from 1947 to 90. So, immediately after the independence, the major situation was that due to the division of the country, due to the migration, due to the various social problem, the shortage of housing was very severe, and they started with the subsidized housing scheme for industrial workers and economical weaker sections as a package to the particular group in 1952. Then they came up with low income housing scheme for the state and the city level, following that within 1 or 2 years. So, the first intervention was basically for the industrial worker, and then they come up with different kind of people, but definitely they are in the low income housing scheme. Then in 56 they came up with a subsidized housing scheme for plantation worker. Again there was a need for providing housing or low cost housing for the plantation workers in different states. That happened in 1956. After that the concept came that slum clearance, various state government authority they came up with Slum Clearance Act and improvement schemes. So, basic objective of this act was to clear the slum from the congested city to the outskirts or some part where the land is available and improve their condition. That was the Slum Clearance and Improvement Scheme. Next in 1959 they also tried to incorporate little higher, I mean middle income group other than economical weaker section and low income house. The government wanted to become more inclusive in terms of housing provision. 1959 government and started rental housing for the state government employees in different states, because the government employees otherwise they did not have any avenues to get the formal houses from the government. After this phase, government looked into the village housing project. They thought that why only cities or the urban areas, let us look into the village and let us consider on those areas. So, they came up with schemes and projects. Up to this time government felt that all the projects, this was suffering from delay, unaffordability, non-fulfillment of the project, non-completion of the project. One reason for this was the availability of the land. So, they tried to acquire land, to get more land by the state government, so that whenever the housing is required to be developed, the land is available with the government. That was the next stage when government tried to have better prepared for provision of the housing, whereas earlier before this the approach was only housing provision, to give the housing for a particular group. Next they also tried to bring some kind of reform in the Rent Control Act, in the legal reform. They understood that not only the housing provision, like the land, the reform and land assembly, land is required. Similarly, unless until we reform or we change, modify or amend the different acts which controls the housing delivery and housing governance, the people will not get house in a cheaper rate. So, they revised this. At the governance level, they thought that that we need a apex organization in the country to develop various technical and innovative solution in terms of technology, plans and designs, materials, and which can steer the knowledge, training and research in the different states. So, in 1970 they established Housing and Urban Development Corporation, HUDCO. So, till now the HUDCO is working at the apex level and coordinating all such similar projects. Then again the project for the rural areas was repeated in 1970s. For the till this point they worked for the housing provision, but now there was another approach that people thought about that without giving the house, can we improve the environmental condition by giving the basic services like water supply or accessibility or sanitation and the waste management to the existing slums. So, if we provide the environmental improvement, unless otherwise also if we do not even give the provide the housing structure, this the building, then also their quality of life improves substantially with the improvement of the environment and the basic services. Then it was tried to bring slowly some enabling environment in the housing market. The Housing Development Finance Corporation HDFC established the basic objective of this bank basically was to create an environment where people get easy housing finance, housing loan. The projects which does not have the enough money, they get the housing loans and deliver the projects. So, we can see for the first time after the independence that government tried to have some enabling environment in terms of land and then finance. So, we talked about the slum clearance acts and slum clearance approach. In the slum clearance approach, basic objective was to take the slums outside the city or in the periphery of the city and resettle them. So, one of these scheme was, I mean, this approach was known as site and services, where basically they used to provide the site and some basic services like sanitation, water supply and access road, so that they can build their own house in an incremental fashion. But by and large site and services, though it is very successful in some of the pockets, but in some states also it was not such successful because of the location problem which have the limitation, and because of the limitation of getting job in the city core area. So, we will come to these problems later on also, but this was started in 1980s in as a site and services scheme. Similarly, like environmental improvement program, the scheme for urban low cost sanitation program started in cities basically in 80s. Site and services scheme continued, and then scheme for low cost sanitation continued. In 85, the apex program for the rural housing Indira Awas Yojana came. The basic objective was to give very affordable houses in a cheaper rate to the poor people living in the rural area. That was the Indira Awas Yojana. In 1986, basic services for the urban basic services scheme, or in short UBS, came. Its also objective was to provide the basic services, sanitation, water supply etc. to the city people. National Housing Bank established. The objective of National Housing Bank was to create another enabling environment, to create more number of bank to leverage the facility of the housing finance like the HDFC. So, National Housing Bank at the apex level, they tried to incorporate the facility or benefit of the housing finance every level, every state, every city level, and following this various banks and the housing finance institutions developed. In 1988, the first national housing policy came for the first time. Up to this time, government experimented with several types of housing, basically in the provision mode. Basically, they wanted to give housing to a particular people, but after 30-40 years of experimentation, they understood that probably this is not the right way. We should have a comprehensive policy for the whole country, considering the diversity of our geography, diversity of the community, diversity of the religion, diversity of the economic disparity. So, the first time in 1988 national housing policy came. So, after this, this is the first time, then several housing policies came that we will discuss next day, the basic provision of the policy. So, let us see overall how it happened. So, in 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, up to this period, basically government's role was as provider, like their role was to provide house to a particular economic group or particular category or particular state or particular cities, but slowly they started realizing that this is not sufficient. So, they came up as a role as a enabler, and they started several works like say National Housing Policy, NBO, all these works, and which shows that government tried to create an enabling situation so that others also can act and can provide housing for the poor and the all groups. And the after 90s, after this time, this part is little different. We will discuss next day that here government also tried to become a facilitator, even if they provide the housing or enable others to provide housing. Here their role is to facilitate the process, to facilitate the acts, reforms in the land and finance, so that other like private companies, joint venture companies, housing finance institution, there is a ecosystem or a environment is created where everybody can participate, everybody can act, and everybody can deliver housing. So that was the that is the paradigm. This will be discussed next day. But what we got, that till 90s the major barriers we observed, major problem was basically housing affordability. Other than the houses given by the government, which is in the subsidized rate, other than that there are very few projects or the people who could afford the private housing or the formal housing. Then another major barrier was the delivery of the housing. Usually a housing project takes several years, sometimes 3 years, 4 years, and because of the conventional technology which is by and large slow, and because of the non availability of the urban land, the delivery of the housing was very slow. Apart from that, institutional and policy framework was a major drawback in this period, because government only understood to frame a policy in the before 90s, in 1988 only. Before that they were going in a path of a kind of a piecemeal approach. They are taking the projects by project approach, they are providing the housing in terms of the specific groups. So in terms of building materials and the technology, there was a need for innovating in the building materials and technology, so that we can come up with a faster housing construction, permanent housing construction, permanent buildings, permanent units for the common people. That partly the HUDCO and some other organizations they started, but definitely lot of works need to be done. And lastly, the availability of the skilled and unskilled labor. Whenever there is a change in technology or the building materials, we need a continuous changing of the skills of the laborers, because the amount of the skilled labor is very low in our country and unskilled laborers are abundant. So that is why that is another major barrier in delivering housing in desired quality. And also there are shortage of the standards, norms and schedules. Right now we have different kinds of standards, norms applicable in India, but slowly we should come to a common paradigm, common standards, common norm, where every state can act, every state can deliver housing with some commonalities and with some contextual differences. So next day we will discuss the policy intervention 2, where we will discuss after 90s how the policy and the public interventions changed from a provider enabler mode to a facilitator mode. So for a quick summary, we discussed today 3 elements. One is policy, planning and strategy. Policy is the long term broad principle, intangible principle, it is inclusive, but its major objective is to bring some tangible benefit for the common people, whereas planning is very specific to a particular region, cities and region or a city or village, which gives a prescription for the benefit of the people, and it is also inclusive, whereas policy is inclusive and basically serves large area like a country or a state, and strategy is basically tactical position to achieve some particular objective under the planning. Therefore, the policy is basically long term vision where we want to reach the goal, the target, and planning is basically prescription for a city or region what to do and what will be the path of achieving all those objectives and specific, and the strategy is basically how to achieve the path and the methodology, and then we described and demonstrated some of the public interventions by Government of India after 47 till 90s, where we have seen that their approach was basically to provide housing for each and every category of the people, but in 90s, in just before 90s, in 88, they felt that definitely they should come up, they should come out from a provision mode to a facilitator mode, and they should approach in a comprehensive way. That is why they made the National Housing Policy 1988. So, next day we will discuss the national housing policies after the 90s, and then we will come up with several other interventions and we will discuss in details. Thank you.